Evening, everyone. Time is 6:32, and I'm going to first call to order our first of two public hearings. The first one is to amend and replace Chapter 77 in its entirety. Ms. Camp, are you going to present this one?
Sure. So let me start with that because Chapter 77 is obviously adopted through an ordinance. To amend it, you have to have an ordinance hearing. And we did advertise tonight's public hearing in the Daily Local News on November 7th, 2023. So I have that proof of publication as the first exhibit. And because we only do a summary ad when we advertise it in the paper, we are required to make the full ordinance available for public inspection. And we did that by sending it to the Daily Local News and to the Chester County Law Library on October 24th, 2023. So this ordinance, it's not as severe, so to speak, as far as changing what you currently have. Your Chapter 77 has evolved in terms of every time a new street gets added to a permit parking area, it's been piecemealed throughout the ages since it's first adopted. So Ramsey said it's sometimes very difficult to enforce whenever we have to cite people for violating the permit parking regulations, and the citations have to be issued. Citing the appropriate section becomes difficult. So she took it upon herself and worked with our office to just try to make it more user-friendly. There was a lot of repetitive language in each of the permit parking area sections. So we decided to just basically rearrange and make it easier to read. So that's the main purpose of this ordinance. In doing that, there were some policy changes that were also made. I'm actually going to defer to Ramsey to maybe describe what those policy changes were. One of the other things we did is rather than have the ordinance specify which streets or which properties were within which districts, we simply refer to a resolution to be adopted by council, and that resolution will then establish specific boundaries of each of the permit parking areas. That way, if something gets added in the future, it's easier to adopt that through a resolution process rather than have to go back and advertise for a public hearing to amend a specific area. So Ramsey, I hope that's okay that I turn it over to you as far as policy changes.
Sure. One of the biggest ones, we did remove the requirement for car insurance. The one that we've been talking about the most is for student renters. We removed the opportunity for them to receive guest passes, but we did offer that they would be allowed to use out-of-state license plates and registration. I know this has been talked about a lot. The other point that I don't think anybody, I don't know if it was discussed last night, again, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the conversation, is that student rentals, so for instance, if a student rental property has a maximum of 4 occupants in an apartment and they have 2 off-street parking spaces, this ordinance will now only allow them to get 2 on-street parking permits. So we are removing cars from the street. So I know we did a case study for 741 South Walnut, and I actually looked, and somehow they had 215 parking permits last year. They really should have only had 144 maximum. This would reduce it by 96 cars. So we would be taking 96 cars off of the street by just one apartment complex. So this is, I know that there's a concern about allowing more people to park, but even if you're saying that out-of-state people would have to make their cars in-state, you're still allowing them to park here. So I don't think that rule is going to keep people. It just really puts the onus on the department to argue with angry parents, and it really keeps kids from being allowed to park near their homes where they're paying to lease. So that was my point on the student rentals. The other change that we did, the business permits are now required to have, instead of just being allowed to say that you have a business in the borough, we ask that you, there are certain hours that you're not allowed to park overnight. And you must supply a car that's registered to a business, and insurance that's registered to a business as well. So it can't be just, anybody that has a knife traveling business that's registered to themselves and says they work within the borough. So it's really more for actual businesses. Rooming houses used to get 1 guest pass per tenant in a rooming house. Guest passes for those would now be 2 per house. So that would also alleviate some parking on the street.
The rental property management permit is a new concept.
Oh, yes, the rental property management. So landlords that have a rental property would be offered a hang tag for each property. We have a lot of like Westchester off-campus housing was asking us to give a parking permit to every person that used or that had to service a property address. Instead, we'll give them a hang tag that they can share within their property management companies. That would be similar to a guest pass, a different color, not used for overnight parking unless there's a major emergency. And then they can use that and share that. So that way we can keep an eye on overusage and also track it.
Another change is you currently do not allow the Washington Square apartment. And we also recently amended so that the multifamily development proposed at 410 South High, that's currently in your code that they are not eligible for residential parking permits. But we have added to this particular ordinance that any mixed-use development at 250 East Market and any mixed-use development that comes in at 322 West Market would be not eligible for residential parking permits. So those are 2 changes that were added, proposed to be added, I should say.
Okay. Any more, Ramsey, or you good?
I think we covered them all.
So I have a question. I have a couple questions, but I'll just start with one. So the idea of taking away permits for properties that have off-street parking, do you have currently like a database? Like, how are you going to regulate that?
So we have one of our interns, JP, does have a database that he worked on for the student rentals. So we do have that working, and we are working with building and housing. One of the proofs that they'll have to provide as their second proof of residency is the tenant list that the landlord will provide. So it's going to be a work in process. I know there will be some bumps along the road, but I think we have a starting point. I don't have a.
And that requirement as well of subtracting residential is only for student permits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have other things, but I'll open it up so people can talk.
I do have one question. Last night at the meeting, a resident mentioned that it was possibly in violation of Pennsylvania state law to give out-of-state residents, students specifically, parking passes. What, if you could just explain that?
I don't agree with that. So I think the premise was the current code section. If you are I guess it's students, if you have a vehicle registered in another state, well, actually the way it is that you have to prove that your vehicle is registered in Pennsylvania to be eligible for a parking permit. There are students from obviously other states that go to Westchester University that are not having Pennsylvania be their primary residence and not having their cars be registered in Pennsylvania. And that's not against the law. The Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Code does not say that if you are a temporary resident of Westchester because you're going to school here, that your vehicle or your parents' vehicle has to become registered in Pennsylvania. That is not what the law is. So I don't see that we have the right, or the borough has the right, to say to a student who lives in New Jersey, who has their parents' car or their own car and has a lease in the borough, if they're choosing that this is not their permanent residence and their permanent residence is in New Jersey and they're actually paying out-of-state tuition to Westchester University because they're not a Pennsylvania resident, the borough can't say, in the law, the Pennsylvania law doesn't say you have to register your vehicle in Pennsylvania. If they declare Pennsylvania as their primary residence, then yes, that's right. That motor vehicle code section does say then you must register your vehicle in Pennsylvania. But I don't think that we are asking anybody to violate the law by allowing an out-of-state student to maintain an out-of-state registration, but yet still be eligible for a parking permit.
Thank you.
I have other things unless somebody else on the dais. Go ahead, Patrick.
Does this overall reduce the cost of enforcement, or is it increasing it?
I don't think anything's going to reduce it because I think that with the land development coming in, I think that we're still going to be consistently enforcing. I think this will help us we spend a lot of time tracking guest pass abuse because we know students are using guest passes as parking permits. And so that's what a lot of the nighttime officers do. They just track guest passes where they could be looking at other things in town. So it would alleviate that. It would alleviate a lot of heartache in the office because we do get a lot of upset students and parents, especially because they're not told when they sign a lease that they're not allowed to get a permit. Their landlords never tell them that they need in-state tags. So this was my first permit season and I've never had so many crying parents on the phone. Yeah, I don't know if it would be a reduction in enforcement costs.
Thank you.
I think it would definitely make it easier to enforce guest passes if we're taking off that many of them, because most of them, or I don't know if most, but a lot of them are being abused, like you said. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Allen.
So I was one of those students who was out of state, and I could have gotten a parking permit where I lived when I was in my undergrad, but I was not able to. I did not cry on the phone to the parking department, though, I promise. So I think that's great that we can fix that, because like for me, when I moved here, part of the reason I chose to come to school here was because I wanted to be part of this community and I wanted to be a resident here. And it was very discouraging throughout my entire college experience here, because I felt, I don't know, I just felt like most people didn't want me there as a student. And it was all because of a small percentage of loud and obnoxious students that we're all familiar with. And I think there's a large student community that makes our town more vibrant. So I'm personally, with this ordinance, I'm really struggling with how differently we're treating our college residents compared to everybody else. If we have issues with density, with apartment density, I feel like that's something that we could, and that's something we're already doing, right? When we get a new development, it's expected that they have a certain amount of parking, and then we're not allowing street parking. If there are apartment complexes that are too dense with too many parking permits being issued, I feel like that's an issue that we can tackle without making it a student issue. So personally, I would like to find a way to resolve these problems without making like 2 tiers of residents here. And the biggest thing for me is and I know that it's not my job to think about it all day, but I feel like finding a way to more efficiently police guest passes would be amazing. But I'm sure you spend a lot of your mental energy on that problem. So if there was a way to do it, I'm sure we'd be there, but I'm not sure.
I think it's hard because, we do have an option for doing electronic guest passes, but that would require that every time you have a visitor come over, you would have to register their license plate online. And I think that with the way that this borough operates, I don't think we're there yet. I think that is an opportunity, and then it wouldn't require any enforcement on our end. It would just be self-reporting, but I don't think we're there yet. And I do hear what you're saying about the students, and I don't want anyone to feel like this is an opportunity to alienate the students further. This really was a chance to fix something that we could see was wrong, where these kids couldn't get permits. And student rentals right now, because they're such a clear, concise, individual type of permit that's registered in our building and housing system, it's an easy way for us to start. It's a starting point. But I've said to pretty much anyone that'll listen to me, I do think that in 2024, we're really going to have to take a look at parking comprehensively and just kind of rebuild the system in general. So I think this is just the starting point. And I do think with the new land development coming in, there's, this is just an easy start, but I don't want anyone to think that this is like an attack on students at all, because it really was a way to get them to kind of be able to park near their home and make it easier for them.
And then what do you see that needs to change for us to be ready for the electronic guest pass system?
I think that's more of a social situation. I know a lot of people like the opportunity to monitor the hang tags to know who's in their neighborhood. So I know that's just kind of a social thing that people are used to. And then I know that it's just a generational thing. I don't think everyone here would socioeconomically, I don't know if everybody has a laptop. I know everybody has a cell phone, but to be able to log into your account and to do that, I don't know if that's really a divisive tactic right now. I don't know if everyone age-wise is in that ability to do that. So I want to be mindful of all that.
Any other thoughts on the days? No? Okay. Can open this up for public comment then? Yeah. Anybody wants to speak, make sure you state your name and address for the record. No one all jump at once. Hi, Dennis. You got to come up to the mic, Dennis. You do, yeah. Yeah, not on the social media side.
Well, my name is Dennis Hallaker, and I live on the 700 block of South Adams Street. It had to be something urgent for me to come up here. I'm very distressed on just a few things I've heard, make it easier for the college kids. I live near the college. I got to pay to park on my own block because I don't have all-street parking. It bothers me to think that people who don't have to worry about these problems that I got to worry about are making decisions that affect me. Make it easier. And then you want to talk about out-of-state college kids and their problem with parking and everything like that. They're going to park on the streets, and their friends are going to park in their parking spots that some of them have in the backyard, bringing more college kids into at least my area because I live in that part of the town. How are you looking out for the best interest of people, the taxpayer, in Westchester by making it more easier for them? Lord help me, some of the things I'm hearing. I pay taxes, and yet I'm hearing that you're trying to make it more comfortable or easier for someone who's only going to be there from 1 to 4 years or something like that. It might continue on, but I got to live here because I chose to live here. I got roots in here. I've been living in Westchester for over 60 years, probably more time than most of you people in here. I got to hear some distressing noise about that. I complain about possible college kids in a rental because it's supposed to be, you're not allowed to move into a house or property that is not designated for college kids. I said something to you sent a letter, an email to somebody back in August. Didn't hear nothing. I talked to a few people. I'm not going to say no names. Never heard nothing back. It's almost like, what is going on here? Or who is looking out for our best interest? If there's a law that is in question about parking for out-of-state people who have to get registration and things, fight for us. Because if you're not fighting for us, then whose side are you on and who are you trying to benefit? I don't want to say no more because I'm getting too upset.
Thank you, Dennis. Other public comment? Ms. Carroll? Yeah.
Mine is possibly long because it's several things. So anybody else? I go first. Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street. I apologize that I did not, well, I don't apologize because I have this opportunity tonight to thank the Director of Parking as well as the Parking Committee and the Borough Solicitor for paying attention to the fact that this does need to be revised and to make it more clear to understand. And I think that that job has been well done. Having said that, there are a few things that I would like to address. And I will go in order if you want to follow along on your ordinances. On page 2, on the definitions of holiday, I would like to request that we add Eve to Christmas and New Year's, because the real holiday for New Year's for most people is New Year's Eve. And the real preparation for Christmas is Christmas Eve. And a lot of people have people over. Plus, there's no enforcement anyway. So we could get away with it, but you may as well make it correct and legal. Also on that page, the word vehicle seems to be inconsistent with the use of the term on the next page in 77-3, midway down, permitted to park a motor vehicle. So the vehicle as described in the definition doesn't always have a motor because it says stuff that's pulled behind you. So I just want to call that to,
Those are verbatim from the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle. So
no, the vehicle is fine, but in 77-3, you inserted the word motor vehicle, which doesn't include things that are pulled behind that don't have their own motor, like the things that are often parked on some of our streets. I just call that to your attention. The down at the bottom of that same page 3, a residence that abuts the streets. Does that include apartment complexes like the apartment complex on Neal Street at the railroad track? That's been there for a while, but it just jumped out at me in the last couple of years that that's what it says. And if that's true, those 35 residents that are part of that complex would qualify for parking on streets where there is essentially no parking, but on the little block of South Adams Street and the 40 spaces at Greenfield, which are available, or 500 block South Franklin Street, or fight for it on the 600 block of South Franklin Street. That doesn't, if that's true, we need to be aware of that when we're talking numbers. So can anybody answer that
Are they
question?
Student housing?
Pardon?
Aren't they student housing?
They are student homes, but they're pre-student home ordinance. Therefore, they weren't required to have 4 spaces per student home. And they may not legally be able to have 4 people. They may only be able to, for building and housing purposes, may only be able to have 2, but they only have 1 space per unit. Actually, I counted those spaces. I think there are 51. I count parking spaces like a maniac.
we didn't change this language. That's the language that's used. And as far as designating the areas, we didn't change that. So we'd have to look at the resolution to see if that, what you're talking about is currently in an area. Is it?
It is in the permit parking area,
Which one?
A. And if that's what we mean, I didn't think those folks were ever able to get permits before. I want to be clear on what we're talking about because that's every apartment complex in the Southeast. And that's a heck of a lot.
Well, to be clear, though, this is also removing the permit areas from the ordinance into resolution. So if there is an issue like that, we can catch it and modify it at the next meeting via resolution before we release 100 permits accident. There's not, that's the point of removing the permit areas from the ordinance so that we have the opportunity to change situations like this much more quickly.
And that is why I'm here. On the next page in A, little a, at the end, it requires confirmation of termination. How will the borough know if the resident is terminated or the lease is terminated? If it's a month-to-month lease thing.
If it's a month-to-month lease, they'll get a 1-year permit. And they'll have to renew annually. If it's a long-term renter, if they're on a month-to-month lease. If somebody new comes in at that address, we would terminate that permit knowing that somebody new came into that permit address.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
In B, should the PA registration, should it be a PA registration unless it is a business vehicle for the purposes of this section, tenant occupied dwelling? It's not a student resident. So that's a resident. Should it not say PA registration?
It has to be registered to the address. Any tenant occupied renter has to have the license and registration to the address that they're renting.
Oh, so you are enforcing that the registration of the vehicle also has to be to that address.
Yes.
So we're not dealing with the two forms of information anymore. Okay, that works. So we're assuming PA registration because it's very distinct in another place, but
It's not, that's not assuming, it has to be. If you live in the borough and you're registered to that address, there's no addresses that are in the borough that are out of state that I know of. Am I right? Am I right? I don't mean to be direct, but
I have no
that's not an
problem.
assumption. How else could you be registered to a house that's not in the borough?
Right, but if you want to make it crystal clear, we can always add to both A, 77-5A, 1B, and then where you're pointing out, I don't have a problem adding the word Pennsylvania.
right. I thought it was intended. So, okay. On number 3, little b, I think in line 1, you want to say the registered motor vehicle. I'm just a proofreader. And at the end, well, why does the wording in that letter B not mirror the wording in 2B with the correction we just made? Except here it won't say PA registration. So that's the distinction. In the previous one, it would say PA registration, but this wording should mirror that wording with the exception of leaving out the PA if you're going to do the out-of-state. I still don't agree with it. I think it's my reading and Kristen's reading of the state statute are different. I would invite you all to read it. It's fascinating.
And I don't see how the two sentences, I think they are exactly. I just read them very quickly, but I think B above and B below say the same thing.
Well, I was tired. So as long as they do, then I'm fine. Okay. With the same words.
Yeah.
They may, yeah, okay. Letter C, now Ramsey said this, all tenants should be listed on this lease, right? So it's not just a copy of the lease with just that kid's name on it. It's the copy of the lease with all the kids' names on it. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
also under D, the rental registration form that's submitted to the Department of Building and Housing must list all of the tenants' names. So that's another check.
Right, and I'm going to get there for a minute, but after the word property, could you add and or unit? Because property to me, but it may mean something different legally to you, but property to me means the lot. It doesn't mean the 2, 3, 5 units which exist in the southeast at that property. That would help.
Good. I mean, yeah, I guess you could to just be super clear, but if you're leasing a property and you live in an apartment, your lease would have the apartment on it, correct?
Don't suspend it, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd rather be overly clear than underly
Yeah,
clear. And in D, I don't think the first use of the word applicant there, it's not the applicant who files that. It's the landlord who files that. So I think that word applicant is misused there. I trust you. Number 5, military personnel. Don't they still need a license and registration? Mirroring 3 ABC?
Yes.
I mean, they have to not just present their military papers, but I would think we would like them to have a license and registration as well for the vehicle. I didn't know that that was understood, but I just want to make sure it is. On the next page, section B, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, which are the things that are wiped out. I would like to suggest that 734 South Matlack Street, which is the new as yet to be built advertised $937,000 units, be struck from this ordinance. And I thought there was a note put on the plan during the planning development process because during one of the planning meetings, I asked the developer to agree to that, and he agreed at that meeting that they have ample parking. They have 2 interior garages, 2 full-length pads behind those interior garages, and 5 additional spaces. There is no reason on God's green earth that they should be included in this program.
What is it, 734 South?
Is
Did.
that right?
Did.
The correct address? 732 to 734 address
agree to
to be
that.
assigned later.
Yeah, we agreed to that. I remember that because they had tons of
Yeah,
stuff.
so it should be ordinanced.
And is that, sorry, is that a multifamily?
It's four townhomes. $937,000. We're moving up in the world. Letter D, line 1, if a person sells his or her, I don't think that word sells is right, but it's not a big deal. And in the next to the last line, gets rid of, because you don't necessarily sell it, but if I don't know, didn't have time for the thesaurus. The next to the last line, the borough may charge a fee for the replacement permit. That's a little, I guess I should be okay with the may, but really, if you've changed your vehicle in the middle of a permit year and you've paid $14 for the freaking permit, I think it's the least you can do to just change the information in the computer. But the next 2 title things, they should be capped like all the rest. Those are just housekeeping issues. In the title, the leased and the vehicles, the company and the vehicles should be capped. Going now down to I. The word date, I believe, should be day, because you're not going to put the date on all the parking signs. Just a thought. And I would like, with all of these changes being considered, and this will come up under the resolution, but I would like the borough to consider that permit parking areas, particularly in the southeast and some areas in other wards, should be 24/7. And so therefore, if that were the case, I would like to see a new sentence here that if no days and or times with paren on the S's are displayed, the permit requirement is in effect at all times. So if you would agree to the 24/7, that would have to be added here. Right, but this is about the posting of the permit areas. So if in fact it were agreed to in the resolution, it should also go here. So this is an if then. I appreciate the change on the rooming houses. Thank you. In terms of guest passes, in letter C, I would like everyone to think about a 2-block area changing to a 1-block area. Now that sounds very restrictive, but let me give you an example. Take a block that you know. Let's take the 300 block of South Walnut Street. Okay? If you're in a 1 block of that block, that gives you 1 block on each end to the west, 1 block on each end to the east, and 1 block on each end to the north or the south. That's 6 freaking blocks to find a parking space. I think that's enough. What we have happening is that when there's a party on Walnut Street, South Franklin gets parked out. Or on a couple blocks up Lacey Street, which frequently happens, we get parked out. So I think 2 blocks is too far. my guests wouldn't be able to walk that far anyway. So I don't know if there's any response, but there you go. Under special permits, number 2,
And are you almost at the end here, taking up a lot of time? I mean, usually it's 3 minutes comments. I think you've gotten.
I know, but do you want these fixes or not?
I mean, are you hearing us agreeing with you on all of them? I feel like.
No. Oh, so you're saying don't, okay.
I mean, if you can get through it quickly, we're
All right, number
you're
2.
monopolizing all the public comments. So.
All right, special permit number 2. A copy of the vehicle's registration. Why do you need a copy of the vehicle's registration for a special permit? So are we talking about if somebody wants to, Bernie's example of the Bible study at his house, are you going to ask every Bible study, are you going to ask Bernie to give a copy of every car's vehicle registration? I don't think that would be really possible. So I'd ask you to think about that.
No, but you might want the opportunity to ask for the license plates if we did end up.
That makes more sense. License plate is easy. Guests can text that to you, but they can't give you a copy of their vehicle registration very easily. And the cost of the special permit, if any, I would suggest you delete the if any, because shall be determined by resolution implies that if there's no cost, it'll be 0. So you don't need the if any, my opinion. The rental property management permit on the next page, C, number 4. I think you should allow for or contract with the owners must present proof of ownership or contract or proof of a contract with the owners, unless I'm misunderstanding that section.
If somebody is park manager or multiple, I think what's happening is that they're sending many, many people and they're saying, oh, I'm a property manager here. So they're abusing the system. It was meant to apply to an employee of a multifamily who's the property.
Okay, thank you. I think that in the punishment, being incarcerated in county prison for not more than 5 days is a little heavy-handed, but.
That's standard.
Okay. Okay. Okay, then that is it, other than what I will have to say in the resolutions. Thank you. I hope the housekeeping was helpful, if not the suggestion.
Yeah, and I do appreciate your comments, Ann. I didn't mean to, but 3 minutes is normal. So if anybody's never been to get a master's degree and written a paper, you just got this is what it feels like with your first draft. They print when they teacher gives it back to you. Mr. Cook.
Darrell Cook, 506 South Walnut. I'd suggest that we have a $1 per hour fee for guest passes or special permits. Thank you.
Yeah, and all those fees will be by resolution, Darrell, so they wouldn't be in this ordinance anyway. But Ms. Bain. Yeah, there's one back to you.
I can bubble up there, but you're not going to like it. Sue Bain, 726 South Penn Street. The reduction in guest passes on students, that means there's going to be a lot of cars parking somewhere. The reduction in number of passes to a legitimate student rental. Ramsey said something like 91 cars off the street. They're not going to be off the street. They're going to be on the street. They're going to be surfing for parking spaces. That's how Dennis and I ended up with permit parking in our neighborhood, because we were parked out because the kids were parking in the neighborhood and then walking to the university. So somebody needs to figure out, if you take away all of these passes from students, where are they going to park? Who's going to notify the university, who's going and make them enforce less cars, who's going to enforce that landlords inform their tenants they have restricted parking, because this is going to get ugly and we, the residents, are going to bear the burden.
Yeah, Sue, I've heard that before, especially with the loss of parking on South Adams Street. And I understand the concern, but it's not going to be in front of your house because if you're telling me that there's people that can't get permits and they got to park somewhere, in front of your house is permitted spots. So if they can't park in the residential program. They can't park in front of my house. They can't park in front of Dennis's house.
They are.
So
They're gonna park there.
but
Yeah.
then they'll get ticketed.
They don't come, no offense, Ramsey, they don't come around enough. I've got a car parked on the south side of Rosedale, East Rosedale. We're only supposed to be there from 8 to 11. It's been there all day. It was there tonight. There is no ticket on that car.
Yeah, and that's an enforcement issue, but I don't know that
It's-
the way there's nothing in this ordinance that can address that. specifically.
This is a concern of the residents that you're reducing parking permits, which is great, but there's nothing that's going to stop the students from bringing those cars into the borough. And like moving mattresses and walking pillows, there's going to be juggling of cars. The other suggestion is, if you are going to allow out-of-state license plates to be permitted, they need to have physical permits on the cars so that we know that they are actually legitimate permits, excuse me. How am I supposed to know that New Jersey Volvo is not permitted, but New Jersey Toyota is? They both look like they're bad.
Yeah, understand.
Why do you need to know that?
So we can call you and say, hey, I've got vehicles that should not be here.
Monitoring guest passes, we can enforce as efficiently as we can, and hopefully next year with the budget, if we have license plate readers, we can scan these efficiently. Right now we have 4 officers doing the best we can, fixing broken meters and enforcing throughout the borough. It's not a perfect science, and I do agree that the cars are going to go somewhere, and that's why we need to look at a more comprehensive permit plan so that we know what we're up against next year with the land development as well. So I think we're going to have to just look at it holistically.
Yeah, I think enforcement's always going to be an issue that needs to be looked at and needs to be worked on for sure. I mean, I don't think anybody up here would disagree with that. So, other public comment? Well, if you're telling me that we're not enforcing it now, we already have an ordinance, then that's what you're telling me. I mean, I see tickets in our ward. I see them all the time on Rosedale and Franklin and stuff. So I understand that it's not ideal and it's not perfect enforcement. But there's no solution I have at this moment. I feel like this is something presented that's going to possibly take off hundreds of cars off of the streets. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that we should all be jumping for joy, and yet we're getting hurt with the biggest resistance that I can think of. I don't know what else we can do really. You know what I mean? Like we found a solution that takes hundreds of cars off of our streets. Takes off there, and yet everybody's coming down. Well, you can't enforce it. Well, can we enforce it now? I don't understand. So I don't mean to get like frustrated, but
You're allowed
good
to,
grief. So
because we are frustrated, and this is not a new problem about enforcing these darn things.
yeah,
My God, year after year after year, we keep thinking because there's no problem for the people to come 3 weeks before our permits are expire. It's like they're out there three times the routine come around, and maybe 3 weeks after. But after that, you never hardly ever see them.
Yeah, and that once again is an issue, and I think we need to keep looking at it. We need to keep working on it. It's not going to be solved tonight, and it's not going to be solved tomorrow. You know, so
Things are going. Not in my lifetime, not the current pace that things are going.
yeah,
You know, and our fees keep going up more and more. I'm saying, well, maybe they're going to use that extra money to get extra people out here, but that's not the case. You know, I mean, I like to see where my money's going. First of all, I shouldn't have to pay to park on my own street. But I said, okay, if it's going to help keep the college kids to a men or out, fine. And that's, you know, they don't enforce it. I think you can't park in our neighborhood at what, up to what time? We are supposed to, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock? You're kidding me? After 4:30, you can't contact nobody.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. The college kids, strangers, everybody come zipping in and parking because they know there's nobody to enforce it.
yeah. And then I think this issue needs to keep getting brought up, especially through parking committee. And then Sheila, I know it looks like you want to comment on that. Kat.
I just want to say what Ramsey has put together here is a beginning. And I know how ridiculously difficult it is to park in certain areas in this community. I lived on North Darlington without an alley, and I watched fist fights as a child, people bloody because of parking spaces. I'm very glad you don't do that, but I've watched it. It's really personal to me, protecting people's parking spaces. And it's really important to me that this be enforced. But we have to take these little steps, and we have to keep chipping away, and we have to keep thinking about protecting the parking spaces that we have and sharing them in an equitable way. And I know it's painful and it's ugly and it's super emotional. I did not expect parking to be as emotional. I don't know why I didn't, because as I said, I've watched people punch each other in the face over it. So I should have seen it coming. But parking is more emotional than so many other subjects that I've watched people discuss here. Entire church came out furious, picketing, so angry. And there are people here tonight who know full well how important that was to them, because it really is. It really is. It's not make believe. It's painful. But please know that for me, the purpose of doing these changes is trying to make it better. And I trust Ramsey. I will question her right and left, but I trust that her reasoning is coming from a very good place and a desire to make it better here. So please help us make it better. Understand that we are trying to improve things, and that these changes that we're enforcing are about safety, they're about equitability, they're about sharing our community and keeping up with the times. And hopefully, I want license plate readers all over the place. I want nobody to have to think about anything, and just you get a ticket if you park in this town and you don't belong, period. But we'll get there. Let's keep going.
Mr. Hudson.
Kyle Hudson, 216 North Everhart Avenue. Just to kind of clarify something, I think the miscommunication that I'm seeing here is that you're saying that you're removing 100 cars off the street. And I think what they're trying to say is, no, you're not. Because the cars aren't leaving the street, they're just going to go somewhere else. And so I think, if I could just add my 2 cents, that the problem isn't really a parking problem so much as a zoning problem. I used to live in Ward 7. And we don't have these kind of problems in Ward 7. And the thing I noticed about Ward 7 that's different from a lot of the other places in town is that they're allowed to have parking driveways in front of their houses. And it seems like the main rub, well hey, shake your head. The main rub seems to be that people can't park in front of their homes. And if that seems to be the rub, perhaps allowing people to have driveways in front of their homes, changing the zoning to allow driveways in front of their homes, which they would then pay a fee, right? Because we have the permeable surface fees, right? We can encourage impermeable surfaces for the driveways, but that would get cars off the road and solve the problem of people not having parking in front of their houses if they wanted so to do that. So just putting that in your ear for people way smarter than me to deal with. Thank you.
Yeah, the housing is different down in the southeast than there. It looks way different, and you also don't have the student population that we have. But just the makeup, single family home, row home, it just doesn't work. And that's come up before council about somebody looking for a variance to put a parking spot in front, and was not met kindly. But I appreciate the thought. So, any other public comment? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Patrick.
Does the university have any policy about whether students as freshmen, for instance, can or cannot have cars? I mean, when I went to Drexel as a freshman, you weren't allowed to have a vehicle.
Yeah, they do. I don't know what it is right now. I feel like it hasn't been talked about in a couple of those BUOG meetings, but I don't know. Do you happen to know, Nick?
I'm getting older, so it's not as recent as it once was. But when I lived on East Gay Street, I was allowed to be a commuter, which seemed wild to me at the time. I won't lie. And it's not permit on 200 block of East Gay, so I could just park there whenever I wanted. But maybe that's something we could talk to the university about, how it seems a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, to provide parking. Yeah, absolutely.
University problem become our problem. They want to populate the university. That's on them. It shouldn't affect us, the people who live here day in and day out and pay taxes. And I hear the university don't even pay taxes, and yet somebody's allowing them to get whatever they want.
Yeah, I understand, Dennis, and I believe me, that is a bit the concern since before I can remember being here. But the issue is these people live, whether it's for a small amount of time or not, they're paying money, they're renting homes, they're living in these houses. So I don't know how we can go at the university and say, well, these people live on, I don't know, Walnut Street, and we can't allow them to have parking. So now it's I don't know how that legally we can deal with that. I understand what you're saying though. But it is our problem. They live in our municipality. I don't, we have to deal with that. So Sue.
It used to be, and Nick can correct me on this. It used to be that freshmen on campus were not allowed to have cars.
Yes, that's what it used to be too. It was 20 years ago.
The suggestion was made to President Weisenstein, whatever his name was, more than once, that South Campus stadium parking be opened up to the students who live in town. They can park their cars down there during the week. Most of them leave on weekends anyway. And the university came back pretty much with a resounding no. Now, my time was at the University of Delaware. And okay, that's a few years ago. But that was how Delaware managed a lot of the off-campus student housing.
I know that in recent years, Dr. Fiorentino has opened that up for student housing, that whatever that lot was, a Q lot or something all the way down there. Yeah, it's opened up for student, and they had increased shuttle services too, because then students are like, great, I'm gonna park there, I can't get to my car. So I know that there are solutions there. I'm not saying it's fixed everything, but I know they are allowing that for student parking currently. I don't know which grade, I don't know if it's freshman, I don't know that answer. But.
We also have 2 garages down near the university that the university uses that were not there before.
Yeah, they own those.
They were quite disruptive to people in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay. Any further comment or anybody? Okay, Mr. Allen, yeah.
I really don't want to open a can of worms with this one at all, but is it legal to, we've done a lot of work about not permitting certain new apartment complexes or developments to have on-street parking. The whole trick of like having off-street parking and then I go park in the permit and then let other people park in my parking spaces, and then I get guest passes that I can then give to other people, and now I'm going to have like 4 spaces on the street filled up for maybe 2 people who live somewhere, like that's allowed? Is including the number of off-street parking spaces, as like Can we use that to calculate how many permanent spaces you get on the street?
Saying that you have available parking that you're supposed to be using. And so, yes, so your ability to park on the street is reduced because you have available parking on your lot. So yes, I do think that is legal.
Is that something we've considered before?
That's what we're doing for students, but that is the 2024 discussion that we should be like
Yeah.
considering. Yeah. Mm-mm. They're not.
Not with this. If we pass this, they won't.
Right. Right.
My thinking was, because I don't want to discriminate against just the students, to have this be an across the board thing, because I can do this if I want. I have 2 parking spaces. I'm very grateful for that. So I can go I can buy a permit. I can put my car on the street. I can give out 2 guest passes, and then I have 2 spaces, but I'm filling up 4 street spaces legally that way. So if we did that across the board, that's something that I potentially could see as being helpful. And we can look at that in 2024. Obviously.
Yeah, I don't think at this point we have the ability to do that because with student rentals, we know what the maximum occupancy is. We don't have that with single family dwellings at this point. We could do that with the new land development with the different apartment buildings that are coming in because I think we'll have a maximum occupancy because we know how many people would be in an apartment building or an apartment. Single family homes are a different animal. But if we worked with building and housing, I think we would be able to do something like that. It gets a little dicey when people close up their back patios and then, or they make a patio where there was parking. But yeah, it is something to consider for the future for sure.
You're going to have a big problem in my ward because we all have off-street parking and they insist on their permit parking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a can of worms and I won't be here for it. So. Any other comments? Okay. So at this point, if somebody's so willing to, I think a motion to accept this ordinance would be appropriate.
I will make a motion to accept this ordinance.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to accept the ordinance as presented. Further comment? You want to? You can make a comment.
Just a question: are the fixes or any of the suggestions made being included? Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street. Are any of the things that were commented upon, other than typographical errors, being accepted?
I think the only one that you crossed out there was one, Kristen.
These are policy decisions. So the first one was whether you want to add Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. I don't know if you guys care about that.
If you
Yes,
want
please add that.
Okay.
Okay. The next one is getting rid of the word motor and putting just vehicle. That's not a problem. Next
Please.
one is adding the word PA for the registration for the owner occupied and tenant occupied. The next one is changing the word a to the, not a problem. Next one is adding where it said property, add and or unit, not a problem. The next one was getting rid of the word applicant. That's fine. And then making for the military personnel, adding the requirement that they also provide the driver's license, proof of ownership of a registered vehicle. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
This is a policy decision whether you want to add for a property that's not eligible was the 4 townhomes at 732, 734 South Matlack.
Yes, please add that.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I thought that was already.
It's on the land development plan, but it's not in chapter 77.
Do you
Does
want
it
to add?
need to be in chapter 77 if it's already in the land development plan?
It's probably a good idea because
well.
the land development plan isn't always something that somebody can access. And you guys know it, Ramsey knows it, Kevin knows it, but 5 years from now, will somebody know what a note on the plan says? It's like,
Then we're going to have to list Burger View.
Well, they're in.
They're there.
They're listed in there.
It's in
They're
there.
listed in there.
yeah, that's in there.
They are.
It's in there. They're all in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then list it. If it doesn't hurt, yeah, put it in there.
Okay.
Okay.
The next one was changing the word sells to, we could put transfer ownership of, if that works for the car. Capitalizing the titles, which general code changes it anyway, but we can do that. The thing about the 24/7, that's a policy decision. I think that's probably not something that you're ready to discuss
No.
right now. The 2-block area is also something that's sort of a policy discussion.
Not right now.
And then we talked about for the special permit that Mrs. Ramsey, to not require the vehicle registration, but to require the license plate. That's okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
And then the, if any, delete that. That's not a problem. All those I think I wouldn't call those material changes. And I think that you can still adopt it with those minor changes.
Okay, so is that okay with
Yes.
the person who made the motion? Who made the second?
Please adopt
did,
with those
yes.
minor changes.
And I second.
Okay, so we're good with those changes. Motion was made and seconded. Without further discussion, Mr. Metric, would you please call the question?
Yes. Ms. Vaccaro? Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
No.
Mr. McCoy? And Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Sorry, Ms. Dorsey and President Stefano.
Yes,
Sorry.
motion carries 6-1. Okay. Okay, we are closing our first public hearing. How long? Ooh. Second public hearing is now approving our 2024 budget. Mr. Metric.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I just want to mention there was a advertisement of the budget in the Daily Local News published October 25th, 2023. That indicated this budget was made available for public inspection according to the rules of budget adoption. Tonight is the hearing that's required in our charter and admin codes prior to adoption of your budget. After this hearing concludes, council, the budget would be in a position to adopt in some state, or it could be tabled and we could adopt it at the December meeting. However, the budget must be adopted before December 31st, before the end of the year. And since we are in a new council election cycle year, there is an opportunity for the new council, when it's seated, to reopen the budget within a certain amount of time prescribed by the code, should they want to make any changes in January or February. That's a little bit about the procedure. If I may continue, we discussed the preliminary budget at our meeting in October, and we gathered input from council, and we circulated, myself and the finance director circulated some options to council to consider, do some homework on. There were no deliberations. We're here back in this hearing to have those deliberations about changes to the budget. And Barbara and I took those comments and we crafted what we thought was a solution that we heard many of you say. Of course, we didn't take a vote in October. And that's what I have printed out and put at your seats this evening. And there are copies available at the end of the table here. And what this does is proposes certain changes to the existing preliminary budget, the one that's been published. Most notable of which would be an increase in the real estate tax rate of roughly 3%. That would generate about $158,000 of new revenue. The reason that number is a little bit lower than my original memo to you is that we got our final borough-wide assessed value report from the county assessment office today, and the borough didn't grow as much as we thought it would. We had thought there would be a 1.3% increase in the base assessed value, and in fact, it came in maybe just came in about half of that. So that's why that figure is a little bit lower than what we saw in the memo. I'm working through this ledger of changes that was part of the information at your desks. The second thing was also good news in that it was found money that we didn't have in our budget. That was the winter maintenance agreement revenue of $32,292. And we're proposing 3 changes to expense line items in the general fund. An increase in our general liability insurance that affects several general ledger line items in our budget that we have parsed out by departments. We didn't list them all. but we got our renewal for general liability insurance came in unfortunately a little bit higher than we thought. It came in at 11% rather than 7%. So we're seeing a plus 15,000 variance on that budget line item to the detriment to leading expenses. The big change, and what I thought I heard and what I thought I heard many of you say last month, was to take money back out of the liquid fuels fund that was going to be going to street lighting so that we could spend and allocate more money towards paving. And what we were able to do is take that $130,000 that was in the liquid fuels, is currently in the preliminary budget in the liquid fuels budget, and move that to the general fund. And in so doing, the liquid fuels dollars that can be allocated to paving increase from $192,000 to $322,000 and change. For comparison's sake, this year's paving program came in at about $420,000 more or less. And this year's paving program was bolstered by a cash reserves and liquid fuels account that was left over from a year that the borough took off from paving entirely. In 2020, the borough did no paving at all. So we were able to do a lot more paving in those 2 subsequent years. And that's the main reason for our ability to do a little more paving this year than we typically can. In addition to moving that 130 back into the general fund as an expense and also increasing the real estate tax rate, we have an additional $45,000 available and change for paving. That brings the entire total of increased funding for paving to a grand total of $368,812, whereas in your preliminary budget, you had $192,878 for paving. So this is the big thing that's moving between where we were in October and where we are here. There is a proposed tax increase from 7.7 mils to 7.93. That's a 3% increase, with an increase of about $170,000 more or less for paving. Those are the highlights of these proposed budget changes. We think we have done our best to transcribe what we heard last October, and this is how we've organized it for you to discuss this evening, in addition to this information circulated earlier.
Got it. Yeah, for me, this is a happy medium. I know there was 8% thrown around before, and from nothing to 8%. So this is kind of somewhere in the middle. I think it is our responsibility to, on a more regular basis, be raising taxes as opposed to having these big jumps every however long. So I personally am okay with this. I think this makes sense as far as I can see. But yeah, Mr. Allen.
I know when this was first proposed, we were discussing the idea of having our engineers create, I guess, a more detailed inventory of our roads for paving. And am I correct that you were considering the idea of waiting on some of these paving projects until that was completed?
We've been making some great progress on that. As a matter of fact, we have our inventory system up and running. In fact, you can go on our website. It's one of our published maps, and you can see roadway conditions. So I think we've been making a lot of progress on that, and we are going to start assessing an assessment process where we'll be able to look at our streets that haven't been paid in the last 2 years and start to evaluate them on a 5-star evaluation program. So hopefully in another couple of months, we should have all of our 1- and 2-star roads identified so we can put them in next year's paving program.
The $368,000 figure, is that going to cover all of the 1- and 2-star roads?
I don't know yet, and I think that you and I are thinking alike in the sense that I want to know what is the long-term average investment the borough is going to have to make year over year to maintain its roads in a state of good repair. I don't know what that is yet, and we're going to work on that. That's my best answer.
Mr. McGinn.
Yes, so thank you for putting that money back into the liquid fuels for paving. Besides parking, one of the complaints that we get is regarding our roads, and I think that they have done a good job this year, as well as the additional work that's been done as a result of the Aqua and Pico projects. The one thing that does stand out for me is the health insurance, and I think that that's something that we should look into and discuss about an RFP. I know that we had that conversation before, but I think it's best to see, what's out there that could lead to some savings, and you could still get some good plans out there moving forward. So that's what I would have to say. In addition, I think that, no one really wants to raise taxes, but I believe in this instance, a 3% tax increase is warranted to accomplish our objectives moving forward. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Metro, can you remind us what the tax increase has been for the last 3 years? Do you have that handy?
There was none last year. There were 2 tax increases going into.
Well, when the last increase, the millage rate was 6.96 and it went to 7.70. Correct, yes.
I'm sorry, 6.96 and
7.70.
Yeah, that doesn't give us the percentage. So it was 3% last year?
We didn't raise taxes last year. It would have been in 2022.
Numbers where you said, I think it was 3%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Percent in front of me, but I didn't raise last year?
No,
The year before?
there's 2, I think it was 2
Okay.
years ago.
In 21, you adopted an ordinance in December that changed the rate for 22.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Metrick, another question regarding the 3% tax increase. That's roughly $2 a month on taxes.
I think Barb has done the math on that one. $31 sticks in my head. Median price home.
Yeah, the 3% tax increase would be about $30 a year. So divided that by 12, that'll be about $2 a month.
Thank you.
Anybody else on council have a?
Yeah, I've been waiting for everybody to say what they had to say.
Yeah, Mr.
Obviously, I totally disagree with Mr. Metrick's offer the 3%. I don't believe 3% will sufficiently fund the borough because we haven't even calculated in the police contract yet. I was leaning more towards a 5%, which is roughly $97 a year, which is $8.08 a month, and it's 26 cents a day. And that would generate, if my numbers are correct, somewhere around $400,000. Am I correct, Barb? With the 5%?
It's a little bit lower than that. It's about $301,000.
$300,000. Collecting $158,000, that's the cost of 3 police cars. So it's to me, it's not going to fill any gap whatsoever. So I'm not going to be in favor of a 3% tax increase because I don't think it's going to do what we need it to do. Thank you.
Anybody else in the days? No?
Yeah,
Sorry, Pat.
the 3% is given where we are. Most people, their households, their businesses, what we've seen in terms of inflation and increases is, I don't want to say it's nothing. It's a lot to a lot of people. But I'm leaning towards Bernie thinking, we have a lot of things that we need to do and want to do in the borough. And I'm not sure that 3% is going to get us there. So.
As my offer, of course, I live in the sweetest ward in the borough, the sixth ward. We get a stipend being on borough council. So the first 6 properties that can't afford $100 the first 2 years, and they come to me in the sixth ward, I will fund those $200 for the first 6 houses after I look at their tax information. But $100 a year living in this borough with a police contract that's going to be pretty heavy. What Mr. McCoy said, we have a lot of work to do in this borough. $8 a month, 26 cents a day, $97 a year is I don't think much to ask. So thank you.
I just have a quick question about that. So if we're leaning towards 5%, then why not go for 8 or 10%? If that's the case, I mean,
I started at 8%.
I know, I hear you, but the thing is, you know,
I compromised with Ms. Dorsey.
As Mr. McCoy mentioned, you know, there is inflation. Inflation is about 3.6%. So we're under inflation, which is good. And I think that what we can do moving forward, and Mr. Metric, you know, is that we need to start tightening our belts in some cases. So that way, you know, we're not going to, you know, ambush our taxpayers moving forward. And I think that's on us next year to look at these departments, look at them again. And that's why I'm comfortable with a 3% tax increase. Ideally, I would like to see 0, but that's just not where we're at right now. As you mentioned, we got the police. We need to fund our police and make sure that our streets are safe and that the roads are paved. But in this case, I think that, you know, if we look at 5%, then where does it stop? That's where I'm at.
Well, the Kyle Hudson rule was we were supposed to raise taxes every year and we didn't do it. For one time, we didn't raise taxes for 12 years, which put us in a position where we are now, where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. For example, last night, the Public Works Director had to swing $60,000 to do paving on the savings of a dump truck. So, I mean, that sounds like my kitchen table, me trying to make things work for the grandkids and the kids. Where does this stop, Mr. McCoy? When we have enough money, I mean, not Mr. McCoy, Mr. McGinnis, at the end of the year, that we don't have to borrow money from our capital reserves to fund the next 3 months of the previous year. And by doing a 3% tax increase, look, I have to pay it too. It's not like, and I'm using my borough money that I'm going to make and give to somebody that can't afford to do it. So that's my position on it.
What am I missing about borrowing from our fund where we pay that back? So we've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years and we pay it back. What is so previously we were borrowing money from a bank and financing that at a higher rate. We're essentially borrowing the money from ourselves, paying ourselves back, saving that finance charge. What is the challenge with using our own money to fill a gap temporarily?
The gap is that we should have enough revenue coming into the borough, because we have a lot of properties in this borough that are tax exempt. We should have enough revenue, generate enough revenue to be able to substantiate the startup of the following year that's coming up. Right now, as last year, I think we had $600,000 left over, where we actually needed $1.2 million. Mr. Metric's working hard trying to get that number up. But if we keep spending and not being able to fund our spending, we're going to be, we're on a treadmill.
No, I understand that, and I agree with you to a certain extent. But Barb, correct me if I'm wrong. How much have we borrowed and replaced? And at the same time, too, we're getting more interest on our reserve fund than we've ever had before. Would that be correct? So I think that's kind. I mean, it's kind, I understand again, I mean, but that's the whole point of that reserve fund.
Not exactly. That reserve fund is actually there to do capital projects. That's why it actually was started, the capital reserve fund, to use that. I mean, we can agree to disagree. I just know that by the time we get done with the police contract and looking at how things are going to fall into place, 3%, bless you, 3% is not going to be sufficient to do for Mr. Metric and Barb to do the job that they need to do for this borough. $100 a year is not a lot to ask. You know, the households in the borough. And then when we all convene again next year, if the $100 was too much, then we cut back to 3% tax increase. You know, because the Kyle Hudson rule was raise it a little bit every year until we fund ourselves. Well, we stopped that process.
Can I ask, with the police agreement versus, not versus, compared to a December adoption of this, what does the timeline look like of waiting for the police contract to be clarified before we adopt this budget?
I'm happy to have that conversation with council in executive session.
Mr. Vaccaro, I believe that the last contract that we have with the police, it added, Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, around $400,000 to the budget. Am I correct in those numbers?
I think it was around 300,000, but
It's 100,000 more, Barb. I'm sorry. 300,000. So that's still, all right. So we're sitting here tonight at a 3% tax increase, and we don't know what the police budget is going to be. So if we're going to add 300,000 to it, then the 3% is not even going to cover the $158,000 is not covering even the police budget that we have to approve.
Is that already priced into the budget?
Question. Yes, it is priced into the budget. I would rather say publicly what metrics we use to price that price, because we are in active negotiations. It's working. So we aren't starting from zero. We're starting from somewhere that is
Reasonable.
okay.
So just for clarification, it's not that the police contract is not in the budget. It is in the budget. We just, you know, may be higher or lower than that because we're still in negotiations, for clarity's sake.
And for clarity's sake, if we were to push this off until December and adopt it at that point, what is bad there?
Council has the time. We've got a publicly scheduled meeting in December. You're not under pressure to adopt a budget tonight. You are under pressure to adopt a budget before the end of the year.
Yeah. So I mean,
I think that we should table this until December. Sorry.
okay, it's one.
I agree.
I would agree
I
with that.
second.
All right. Can I allow some public comment, please? Yeah, again.
Yeah, thanks. Since I was brought up by Mr. Flynn.
Famous man in the room.
Well, I mean, I do remember that conversation, actually. Everyone was like up in arms that we were raising taxes. And I was like, well, if we just raise it a little bit every year, then, you know, it will take us time to get there. But Councilman McGinnis, you know, you brought up, you know, inflation, right? I know you work in finance. What was inflation last year? About 11%? 9%. And how much did we raise taxes?
0.
So we got to catch up, right? Like, because the way it works is like the cost of everything goes up with inflation. So if you don't raise if you raise taxes by 0, that means inherently you're making cuts, right? That you may have to cut somewhere since you're not getting revenue in to offset the increase that inflation is bringing on, right? So if Mr. Flynn, yeah, I hear you, and I think that what Mr. McCoy brings up as well is that we have to be careful about ratcheting up too fast. But I think that if we made a commitment to futures, I don't know the numbers. I haven't looked at it as detailed as you. I'm not on the finance committee. But I do think that you can't, whatever you decide, it can't just be what we're deciding is this year, because next year, a whole bunch of 2 of you are going to be replaced, and then we have to do this all again. I would love to hear a long-term plan. I think a lot of the residents would like to hear a long-term plan, and we may be more willing to either pay more than people might be wanting to right now, or maybe council would be less if we knew that there was a horizon that we could work towards. So it just, like you said, for 12 years, we didn't raise taxes at all, which I think is irresponsible. I think any time not raising taxes is irresponsible. I mean, last year, we offset taxes by using money that was supposed to be used for infrastructure projects in this town. We used the Joe Biden money that was supposed to be used to like build streets and stuff, and instead put off our tax burden onto this year. And now we're saying we don't want to do it again. So I'm just saying, no one wants to pay taxes. But if we want to live in a nice place, it costs money. So I think if you did a better job of communicating, I think that's where a lot of the rub comes from. Just communicate with people. Why is your money going up? And we have a plan. It's not just we're doing it this year and then next year we're going to figure it out. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. You know that I care a lot about this. I will leave it up to you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. I think we are communicating that. I mean, the finance committee meets every month, and we've been talking about budgets for quite a while. And I know Mr. Metric has a 5-year plan, like cooking. So like it's happening. I know. I hope that answers your question. I don't know, Mr. Allen.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that I do feel like we are doing that. When we started this budget season, that's something that I tried to stress as clearly as I could, both at Finance Committee and at full council, was that this budget, to me, is the most important one that we've done since I've been on council, because for the same reason you're saying, like we had COVID make things really weird financially in a very negative way. Then we had ARPA funds make things a lot better. And what I'm trying to do and trying to communicate with residents is that we're trying to find this equilibrium where we can set a long-term goal for how we're going to raise our taxes moving forward in a way that's not an, oh my gosh, we need to catch up year in like 5 years. And something that I've talked about a lot that our administration is doing now is our 5-year capital planning has been excellent. We're doing a really great job trying to make sure that like 1 year, if we just look at the sewer plant, that I think we started there, if I'm not mistaken, we tried to make sure that all our big capital projects were spaced out in a way that it was even, so that like, 2023 wouldn't be 200% higher than it was the year before. And that gives us a certain amount of predictability. And we've used the word boring. That's our goal for budgeting, is we want to make it as boring as possible so that every year we're understanding what our gap is. And there's this like organic growth that happens in costs every single year because of inflation and other factors as well. And there's a flip side to that, where when inflation gets really high and interest rates tend to go up to combat that. So then we're getting more in interest. Also, wages tend to go up, so our EIT earnings go up with that as well. So everything kind of flows together. And we find that there's this like organic gap every year. We just didn't have the data we needed to confidently say what that number was. And every year moving forward, we're getting closer to having a more clear picture of what that's going to be. And once we have like a much more clear idea of what the organic growth in our expenses are, I can't remember the term, that I think that's right? Organic growth of our expenses. Then we're going to have a better idea of what that like, because I've talked to Mr. Metric before about like having a percentage in mind that would be maybe like an assumed increase each year that would then cover that issue. And then it wouldn't have to be this whole like surprise that taxes were going up. And it's exactly what you were saying. And I think we're doing that. And I think to the best of our ability, we're communicating that. It just is difficult. People don't want to listen. People don't want to come here, and I get it. You know what I mean? So like, to the extent that we communicate, I do think we're doing a good job communicating that message. And if you have ideas for how we can get that into people's homes, I'm cool with that. And like, I think this is a great idea too. But as much as we can, I do think we are doing that.
Is there other public comment? Questions? Ms. Spain.
This one? It is, okay. Sue Bain, can I ask a couple questions on the actual line budgets here?
On this one here?
No, the actual budget, line by line.
Oh, we don't have that on us yet. Okay.
Okay.
Barb's here. She can answer. Do you have that, Barb? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. My first question would be, if you look at the police salary, chief salary, okay? It's actually going up in 2024. I like our police chief, don't get me wrong, but he's leaving. We're going to get a new one. So why is it going up by, sorry, I can't read on this tiny little phone, how much now? So there's a question there. There's possible savings. Somebody needs to take a look at, please. So in the police budget, defined pension expenses are going down. Contract isn't finalized. Sure.
So the defined contribution only applies to union employees. It's not police officers themselves. So there's been some shifting in some of those positions in that department. So that's why there's a slight decrease there.
Perfect, thank you. How many vehicles are embedded in the budget? You can't actually see who's getting what or how many.
I think there are equipment descriptions in each department that speaks to vehicles. Like the police have 25 vehicles.
Is that necessary? Is that necessary?
Mr. Metrick, what was the answer? I didn't hear the answer.
I'm sorry, I'll speak
that's
up. There are descriptions of each budget, department by department, with their functioning, their staffing levels over the last 5 years, and their equipment. So where we do have vehicles in certain departments, we do add those up. And police have 25 vehicles in their department.
Apparently I missed that. I apologize. Thank you. Sorry. Pennsylvania Municipal Health Medical Insurance is being reduced by $125,000. To be under Public Works. I don't know. That is a question. I can send these to you later if you want.
Are you talking about the revenue line item in the administration budget? Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have it in front of me now.
You might be looking at the refund. So we are in we went over this a few times, right, with council. We're in a group collective. So we pay a premium, a monthly premium, just like most people's health plans work. And then based upon our actual claims experience, whether it's a good year or a bad year is where a lot of people are submitting claims, or maybe some of those claims are very expensive. We'll get a smaller refund, and we'll work with the health company that we work with, and we'll have a fairly good idea by budget time of what our experience is going to be and what our refund is going to be for the coming year. It's not totally clear because we only have 6 months of experience, and it can change. We know next year is going to be a very bad year in terms of the healthcare refund because we had a bad first 6 months. We actually think it's going to be 0. We think it's wiser to budget the healthcare refund on a 5-year moving average instead of doing this guesswork game every year in terms of How are we going to finish the next 6 months? Are we going to have a lot of claims in the last 6 months? So that's what's in this year's budget is a 5-year moving average of that refund.
Okay, thank you. One other one, I can see Mr. Stefano is starting to wiggle up there. Why is there a $1,000 bump on the mayor council line?
Do you see the work that we do up here? Do you see the work we do? The questions we're taking?
I did it for 8
Come on,
years.
I
I
didn't
know
have
that.
dinner yet tonight.
There was
Combat pay.
Sue,
I'm-
don't start. I'm giving mine away.
I haven't had dinner yet either, guys, so.
So that our compensation is set in state law, but it was supposed to be, what year was it supposed to take place where we were supposed to get?
We were looking at our ordinance and we actually figured out we've been underpaying council. So it's an extra 125 times 8. So that's another $1,000. That's why it went up 1,000. The ordinance says $4,125 payable quarterly.
And not to be smacked ass, but that's supposed to be a public vote and it's supposed to be voted and then go into effect 2 years later.
I don't know.
This already was voted on and it already happened administratively. It didn't click in. So the pay raise of that $125 per member already went through all that several years ago and it just never happened.
Yeah,
never got it.
Jerome was sitting right there and he
Just never
complained
got
he's
it.
going to overpay us.
Hold on, is Ms. Bain, are you done yet? Are you done? Because Mr. Hudson.
I'm done for now. Thank you.
That just makes me think then, are we liable to pay you, the previous council members, the money that they were owed during the time
Yes.
period?
We got it.
Okay. Yeah, that's another additional, is that where all that $1,000 is going? Because 125, when was this passed? We've had several members of council, several years. I mean, that could be much bigger than just $1,000. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we got it. Wasn't as much as it seems like a lot. It's not. It's not my. Mr. Cook.
Daryl Cook, South Walnut Street. What is the spending plan for Gay Street
Spending plan for what do you mean?
for closing the street?
Spending plan. Is that? I don't know if that's on a line item.
You mean,
Or is that just under
you
public
mean the
work?
grant that we have to spend the money to do safety stuff up there? Is that what you're questioning?
Yeah, and what will the return be on that? Was the county assessment of Gay Street changed for those properties? Yeah. What is the status of the stream fund plan?
Briefs were filed in the Supreme Court and we're waiting for the court to make a decision.
So the 1.267105 is billing who?
Everybody.
The nonprofits. So do we have a potential liability after the Supreme Court ruling?
Sure do.
Yep, we sure do. To my calculations, 1.7 million maybe.
Thank you.
Daryl, we're on top of pretty much all the dollars and cents. Mr. Jingles doesn't miss many things. But the fact, I don't know what's going to happen with the grant that Mr. Williams is working with the Gay Street. I don't know if you know anything about that.
No, we don't know.
So-
Yet.
Well, we already got the 675 that's being used as part of the preliminary engineering, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. There was mention of tabling.
Yeah, I believe that we should.
Okay.
I believe Ms. Vaccaro made a motion and that was seconded by Mr. Flynn to table the.
Okay. Do
We
we
have-
need
we
to
can
then
take a vote
vote,
on
or is
that.
that just because the motion was made and seconded? Does it just get tabled? I can never remember what this.
I think you have to take a vote.
Is that the vote? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to vote, even if we didn't, but I think we should vote. Yeah. So there's a motion made and seconded to table this until next month. Any further discussion? All right, let's take that. Could you call the question, please, Mr. Metcalf?
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis, Mr. Allen,
No.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey.
She said yes.
She said, thank you. And Mr. Stefano?
Yes.
That's 6-1.
Motion carries 6-1 to table that until next month.
Mr.
Okay.
President, can I jump in again on the
Yep.
parking? We were also supposed to adopt the resolution. The way it was worded was completely replacing it. So the ordinance was adopted, but you also now have to act on the resolution, which is what establishes the permanent parking areas. So that was also in your, that was advertised and it was in your
Oh, okay.
website.
Is that part of the public hearing though, or is that part of?
Well, it's not really a public hearing, but it's not elsewhere on your agenda. And I think Dana thought that that would be handled right after the ordinance adoption.
What, isn't the fee schedule, is that not the same thing? That's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
All right, so,
Somebody to adopt, excuse me, to make a motion to adopt the resolution that establishes the permanent parking areas.
understood.
So do we want to do that now? Or do we want to leave that up for questioning?
I-
mean, for comments?
Well, what's the difference? It's just a resolution, but there's no, that the wording is,
It's the resolution that before the areas were in the ordinance, now they're taken out of the ordinance. The ordinance just refers to a resolution to be adopted by council. So I want to make sure that that resolution is adopted. So they sort of
Understood.
go hand in hand.
okay. Do we have that resolution available to look at? I mean, is there anything different than what?
All it does is take what's currently in your chapter 77 and designate the areas and puts it in a resolution format.
Okay,
So moved.
okay. So you have a
Second.
motion to accept it and a second by Ms. Dorsey. Any further comment, since there really wasn't discussion on it? Any public comment on it? Ms. Carroll?
I would again ask that in permit area A, that they not exclude Saturday, Sunday, and holidays. If you're not willing to change the time, which I understand before discussion, but this resolution says 8 a.m. to 12 midnight daily, excluding Saturday, Sunday, and holidays. I provided some pictures of what my block looks like on Saturday and Sunday. I didn't take holidays, but we have nowhere to park. The residents have nowhere to park. So I would respectfully request that, but understand. If there's some typos, but if the system will pick them up, pick them up. Number 2 in particular, it's supposed to be, I don't think it'll pick that one up. It's supposed to be from, and it says front in little 2 under parking area A. Other than that, they're all typos. But if we have to wait for another year, that means that my resident neighbor who gets off from his chef's job in media at 11 cannot park on the weekends. Thanks.
If we made that change, Ramsey, what's the cost of that? I mean, I feel like that's a lot right now.
We can change tonight, but again, that's something that we should be looking at for the future.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't disagree with Ann's
Yeah.
assessments.
Yeah, I agree too. I just feel like that's not something we can.
Yeah,
tackle right
it's, but I hear what she's saying.
Okay. All right, any other comment on this? Okay, there was a motion made and seconded to adopt this resolution as presented. Mr. Metric, would you please call the question?
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro? Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Stefano?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay. Okay, that concludes our public hearings. And now at 8:15 p.m., I'm calling to order the November 15th, 2023 Borough Council voting session. Item number 1 was our call to order. Item number 2 is our Pledge of Allegiance. Can I please have that led by Ms. Vaccaro? Okay, thank you. Item number 3 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents and attendants regarding items that are not on the agenda. If anybody wishes to speak, they please approach the microphone, state their name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 4, which is comments by the Borough Council and the Mayor. Mr. McCoy, you can lead us off.
Sure. Good evening in the spirit of Thanksgiving. I think it'd be nice for all of us to pay some gratitude to all of you that come out. Some of you are very regular and appreciate your input, but also the whole staff at the borough. Appreciate everything that you do. The boards, commissions, other committees, mostly thankless work. So I think, showing some gratitude towards them is important, and I really appreciate everything that all of you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vaccaro.
I am very excited about the holiday season this year. I am already too busy to keep track of what is going on around here. I am especially excited about the Christmas market moving onto Gay Street. And I'm looking forward to the Christmas parade. So come out and join us for all of these things. The Christmas market will be December 9th and 10th for the whole weekend. So come out and shop in Westchester. Also, don't forget to come out and shop on Small Business Weekend. Get your holiday gifts here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McGinnis.
Yeah, thank you. And usually I'm upbeat, but I think I was a little bit disappointed the way in which the Veterans Day parade was handled. I think that as a borough council, as a community, civic leaders and political leaders, we need to be more involved. I'd like to see more of our restaurants and businesses be more involved in promoting Veterans Day moving forward. And I hope that maybe we could start a commission, a fundraising drive that will benefit future Veterans Day parades. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Flynn.
Greetings from the sweetest ward in the borough, the 6th Ward. I'm honored and also humbled to thank 449 people that live in the 6th Ward out of 460 people that voted. Thank you, Mr. Kyle Hudson, for your vote. Voted for me to spend another 4 years with you and working as hard as I can to make sure that Westchester stays exactly the way you would like it to be. My featured business of the month is Westchester Juice Pod. Anybody who knows Jeff Ricardo and his 8 children, they've opened a business at 14 North Church Street. It's the yellow door and the yellow wall right next to New Haven Pizza. And I've been practicing with Mr. Allen up here because acai bowls, you know how hard that is to remember at my age. Most of they have smoothies and different kinds of bowls in there. And I wouldn't say that it's all healthy food, but they have a full menu inside there. Their business is not flourishing the way they expect it. I think it's because of the advertising and the location. And once a month, I always feature a business of the month. So it's right next to New Haven Pizza. The food is similar to Jocko Taco kind of things. So if you Asia, how do you say it? Acai bowls. I saw them. They look pretty interesting. So thank you very much and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Yeah, it's late, so happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Ms. Dorsey.
I too will be brief. Just want to wish everyone, we're about to enter into the full holiday season. So happy Thanksgiving. And wanted to echo Sheila's comments on the Christmas market and the Christmas parade that are coming very soon.
Cool. Thank you. I just have a few. First, I want to thank Kevin Gore. There was construction going on across the street from me at 700 Franklin Street with they were tearing down. They were demoing on a Sunday. And I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this. So I emailed Kevin on a Sunday and he responded right away, contacted the builders and told them to stop it and knock it off. So just a reminder, when, construction has certain hours and they're not allowed to do construction on Sunday. So make sure you're low notifying people. So I do appreciate Kevin for on a Sunday getting back to that quick. It was awesome. I want to thank the police department and in particular Sergeant Malicki for his help with the research dealing with the bus stop issue that we're going to vote on tonight for that resolution. It was awesome. He went over and above for research, and I really appreciate that. The other thing is the Christmas market. If you guys please go to it, check it out. It's on Gay Street this year, right? There'll be some mediocre Christmas jazz music being played by yours truly on the 9th at between 1 and 4 p.m. on the Saturday. So I'm pretty stoked about that. That'll be fun. And then congrats to Nicole Shimon, who is going to take over for my seat in the 4th Ward. I met with her recently. I've known her for a couple of years now, but I met with her recently, and I'm very excited for her. I think she's going to do an incredible job. So I look forward to seeing what she does in January. So, okay, that's it. Moving on to item number 5, update by JMT/Tool on the Westchester Borough Parks and Recreation PROS plan. Mr. Krowski.
Yes. Keith Karowski, Director of the Parks and Rec Department. I wanted to make sure that the council got some face-to-face time with the folks we'll be working with for the plan that we're going to be creating over the next 10 months to a year. From JMT, Johnson, Meerman, and Thompson, and is Andy Mears, and then from Tool Recreation Plan is Ann Tool. So they're here. I met with Andrew and one of his coworkers today. We visited all our parks. We took about 5 or 6 hours to go to the parks, speak with some folks, and just get a lay of the land. And then they're going to be coming out to the Santa at the Square event on December 2nd at Marshall Square Park to get further input from the general public. They came to the restaurant festival, they came to the Halloween parade, and they're coming to that 3rd event to just gather information from the general public. But they're here for your question and answer and to just give a brief detail of what this plan's all about. So here you go.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's such a great idea. When in the summertime, me and my family spent a lot of time in Maryland, outside Ocean City. Is a town called Berlin, Maryland, and they did something similar where they were like doing some kind of master plan, and they were just soliciting information. And me being my elected official self, I had to go chat with them and ask them questions about recycling. Are you going to require, things like that. So just gaining that feedback at those public events is a really great idea and a great way to gather it. So anyway, please, yeah.
Well, I think Keith said everything I was going to say, and he introduced us. So we're really just here to answer any questions from you guys. I mean, the plan is really going to be community-based and driven, as you said. We have a lot of exciting things to do and planned. I know just being here for 2 hours, I've learned a lot. So we know that some of those things we're going to have to address. So it is really important, even, make a joke about it, but it's really important that we heard that, because those things are going to carry over into the park. And really our first phase is to really understand the community and to make sure we understand all of that before we can even come up with any ideas. But this PROS plan is really a visionary, a big picture plan. And it really has to be specific to your community. And just by being out today and spending some time with Keith in the parks, you have some really great parks. I mean, one of them, you think you're in New York City. You have some others, you think you're in a schoolyard or maybe another type of yard. They really are all over the place. But certainly a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities there. Do you want to add anything in?
No, thanks for having us. Thanks for listening. As Andy mentioned, we're very strategic in our planning. It's not a laundry list of, hey, you could do 1,000 different things. It's very strategic in how you want to get ahead. And we heard that message loud and clear. So it's an honor and a privilege to get to work with you. And we look forward to being with you over the next year. Thank you.
Thanks. Questions for these folks?
Just a comment. One, thank you. And we're really looking forward, as you are, to what you're going to present from a strategic perspective around and capital planning for the parks. And I really appreciate you recognizing and pulling out, identifying that there are some parks that have gotten a lot of love and attention, and there are others that have not been so fortunate. And we'd like to see that they're getting the same level of attention going forward. So thank you for that.
I only have one question to ask you. As you look at our infrastructure, if we are doing something that just doesn't make sense, but because we've been doing it for years and years and years, doesn't mean it's right. Are you going to also bring that type of information back to us that says, like, Keith, you shouldn't have the Halloween parade because nobody attends it, that kind of thing? Or you go to a park that is always wet. If you walk through a wet park, the kids aren't going to use it. Is that the kind of stuff you're going to be bringing back to us?
Ann and I were just at a meeting last night where we told them that take out 6 soccer fields and take out the lights. So yeah, we're still alive. So this process is about giving you the information, and you've got to make the hard decisions.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. McQuaid.
Yeah, and just a comment, and I think it goes in hand with what Mr. Flynn said, setting out from the beginning what the end result is going to be, so that everyone has the right expectations. You know, you're not doing design, all those kinds of things. You said big picture, and I think letting people, us, and as well as the public know what specifically does that big picture mean.
So on the big picture, one of our goals is to never surprise you. We work very collaboratively throughout the process, and we've kind of flipped parks, rec, and open space planning. It used to kind of be linear, and what we do now is work with you to identify opportunities and issues early on, so that early on we could give you the big picture, and we kind of back into that by finding solutions and seizing opportunities, actions that you could undertake. Is that answering?
And I guess it was more of a comment, just in some of the public sessions and so forth, you know, to make it clear, you know, what it is you're charged with and what the end result of your study is going to be.
I'm sorry, I missed the boat there. Okay. This is a park, recreation, open space, and trail plan. Our goal is to help you advance the quality of life in your community through parks, recreation, open space, and safe places to walk and bicycle. We look at everything. We look at, as Andy mentioned, parkland, recreation facilities, the way the water flows. We look at programs, services, management, operations, financing, partnerships, creative solutions to things that may be old hat, but maybe we need to do in a different way. After we look at all of those elements, I'm sorry, I mentioned connectivity too, the safe trail connections. At the end, we will provide you with an action plan on how to improve the community through all of those elements. It will not be a laundry list of lots of different things. We usually key in on 5 to 7 really important things. And this is what we're going to focus on. Following that, instead of just handing the plan over to you at that point, we will work with you in doing a jumpstart plan. Okay, we finished this plan, but it's really the beginning. It's not the end. What are we going to do over the next year to carry this out? Somebody mentioned media in here tonight. We did the media plan. When we finished there, we said, the most important thing that we need to do here is more safe places to bicycle. So we had some low-hanging fruit, painting sharrows on roads, and then some higher end where we wrote and secured about $1.5 million to do the most important trail link. So we try to get things accomplished while we're doing the plan before you even adopt it.
Appreciate it.
But just if I could add one thing, just to be clear, it's not going to say in each of your parks, you're going to have this, and it's not a design plan for individual parks. It's looking at the big picture. What are your unmet needs? What are things that are duplicated? What do you need to get rid of? What do you need to add? Where should you consider those? That's the level of detail for the individual plans, because it's going to be more about setting the stage for your operations and maintenance. And, there's a lot of talk on budget here. You need to know what it's going to cost long-term when you do those investments. So part of that, and that's really Ann's bailiwick, is operations, maintenance, and finance.
Yeah, we know that the borough, we heard your budget presentation. We know you can't do it alone. What this plan will be based on is a 4-part revenue strategy. That's a mix of public and private resources that includes things like grants, gifts, donations, fees, charges, leases, rentals, wherever it makes sense, with provisions to support those who may need some help. So we work really hard on that. We're in the know on grant funding. There's a lot of grant funding now tied to sustainability, climate change, and there's more coming. So we're tuned into that as well. You need a match, usually, although we just secured 2 grants last year that did not require a match for $6 million.
We like those. Can we get
So
those?
we'll be giving you a plan, an action plan that is based on resources.
Yeah, appreciate that. And as soon as you say grants, we all get excited. We love that. So this is awesome. I mean, I'm really excited to see where this goes going forward. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming tonight and spending the time. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on that? No? Okay. All right. All right. Moving on to item number 6 is our discussion agenda. We have A is a motion to approve the resolution to revise the fee schedule. Why was this? Why did we? What was the? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it was the
event parking.
Yes. Okay. So it was mostly the event parking, the 95. I thought we figured that out was because that lot was the first to be handled and the rest will get there. Right. Okay. So really it comes down to the fees for special events. Okay. And I don't know what solution we have. I don't know. Mr. Krause, you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Keith Krause, Director of the Parks and Rec Department. I spoke to our solicitor who was here earlier today, and while we are working on the fees for said events, she said that we could put in our fee schedule basically the clause that says the borough reserves the right to charge a different fee for the usage of the garages and lots for special events such as. And I think there we could list the 4 events which we're currently doing that for. We don't have to set a number necessarily, but we have to at least specify that those 4 events, there's going to be a fee charged. That we're still working on what that fee is going to be, how we invoke that fee, but we can use this clause in the fee schedule as a kind of a placeholder until we figure out that number.
I think that makes the most sense. I'm sorry, we can do Ms. Dorsey.
It does make sense. I would still like, last night we asked for, a use case or a business case.
Yes.
That showed,
And
this events, the attendance, the revenue, et cetera.
I plan on having that for you guys at the Public Works Committee meeting in December. I literally was out all day with these guys today since last night.
Okay, yeah, we were expecting it tonight. I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't get lost. Okay.
I will absolutely have that ready. I will compare 2022 and 2023 of those 4 events, the capacity of the level of people that are expected in attendance, what our fees were for the borough and the services that we provided, along with the fees that we collected for the special events.
And can I ask that we get that in writing? That's an attachment so that we all
Oh,
have
absolutely.
something tangible.
I've got to go through the different departments to get all that, but I'll have that for the Public Works Committee in December.
Yeah, and I think making it one fee for everything I think it's too broad of a stroke. I think each event is a little different, right? So if the Christmas parade brings in the most amount of people, or maybe the Restaurant Fest probably does bring in them, or maybe, I don't know if you know that, but if it brings in this many people, it might make sense because the most demand to park there. And then also something like the chili cook-off brings a lot of people in, but that's a paid event. So like you come to the chili cook-off, you have to pay to enter and participate, where you don't have to pay to participate in the Christmas parade. You can just go and watch. So I feel like there's differences between all those events. So, but yeah, again. Oh, you have something? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. Did we decide what we're charging for the Christmas parade? Because I just need to know.
For next month's Christmas parade.
Yeah.
I thought we had said that we were just going to do what we did last year, which was
$20 last year.
Okay.
It's a $20 same fee for this year.
$20.
$20.
Confirmed. Okay. Thank you.
Confirmed. Yeah. So is everybody okay with that if we change the language to that?
It's fine.
Okay. Okay. That's perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Keith.
You got it.
Appreciate that. Okay. Besides that, is there any other issues with the fee schedule or questions? Okay. Public comment. Okay. Then I think a motion to approve it with that amendment or with that change would be appropriate.
So
Guinness moved, and I got a second. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution as presented with the change in the language that Mr. Kurowski presented about the special events. All right. Mr. Metcher, could you please call the question?
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah.
Ms. Vaccaro? Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey? And Mr. Stefano?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item B, which is a motion to approve a 5-year SPCA service agreement. There was some discussion last night about, some of the issues with the fees, and then there was some more questions asked via email about, how we actually regulate this. And I think one of the biggest questions that was asked, and I think we need to answer to, is somebody brings in a pet or stray animal to the SPCA, and they go, "Yeah, I live in Westchester," but they live in West Goshen. Is the SPCA actually checking that they live in our municipality, and are we getting charged for that? So was there any clarification on that? I know, Mr. Metrick, you talked to the gentleman from the SPCA, but do we have any kind of information on whether they're checking for that? I mean, I don't know. Barb, you have something on this? I'm sorry. Yeah.
So if I may, each invoice that we get each month, it does come from the police department, and each invoice is a summary of all of the cases that they took care of for the month. And they do have sheets behind each one that will contain information about the person that called, the address, where the animal's being picked up.
Okay.
And that's how we catch, if it's not anything related to a borough resident. And we have had issues, and those obviously we wouldn't pay for.
Gotcha. Okay, great. That's so good. That's really good to hear. Okay. Other thoughts, Mr. Flynn? You have something?
Oh, well, if you just, I don't know how I don't take blood pressure medicine, but the baseline contract fee, $2,000 plus upfront monthly fees. And then we have to pay $5,600 just to be a member. And then, of course, we don't pay it. Well, as I told Mr. Metrick, I can't die on this hill because they're the only game in town. And we want them to take care of the pets when they're in distress. Unfortunately, I feel we're getting all the municipalities in Chester County that use this service is getting hosed because of the way their pricing structure is. They have realized that they have a corner on the market and they can charge whatever they want to charge. Mr. Metrick did check to say that if I drop off a dog over at the my world was a dog pound, there's a $400 fee that the borough is going to charge one time. But I haven't got clarification whether if somebody goes picks up their dog, whether we're going to get a credit. And Barb didn't think we would get a credit. It's just money going in and no money coming back. And I think they should be investigated for gouging. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like that makes the most sense to me. If my dog or my pet is taken there, runs away, somebody brings it in, they charge the municipality for holding that pet, and then I go to pick up my dog and I don't have to pay that fee. Like I don't understand that. I don't know if there's a way we have any kind of, are we able to enforce that or push that cost onto them? I mean, to the person who's owner of the pet, if that ends up being the case.
May I suggest, it feels like there's a lot of questions, and we do have an opportunity. I spoke to Adam, and he will speak directly to council. I offered dates to him according to your instructions. We could table this item. We could consider it at December 20. And although the contract in front of you says we need a decision by December 15, I talked to him and he said they'd be flexible about that date. I'm suggesting council consider tabling this motion so we can collect all your concerns. We can get as many answers as we can between now and when you want to make a decision.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Make a motion to table it till the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded to table item 6B. Any further comment? I didn't allow any public comment, so public comment. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Metrick, would you please call the question?
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries 7-0 to table. Okay, and that's moving us on to item 7, which is our consent agenda.
make
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded to approve our consent agenda. Any public comment? Okay, Mr. Metric, would you please call the question?
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey? And Mr. Stefano?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. That moves us on to item 8, other business. Is there any other business? Mr. Cook?
Daryl Cook, South Walnut Street. Have any of you witnessed trucks unloading at the intersection of High and Minor Streets? I'm curious how that's going to work with the bump outs. I've seen a tractor trailer with the ramp down onto the crosswalk.
I personally know. I don't know if anybody knows. Okay. All right. If there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.